Lakeland Currents, your public affairs program for North Central Minnesota. Closed captioning is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org.
Welcome to Lakeland Currents. I'm your host, Todd Haugen. On this edition of Lakeland Currents, we'll talk about the YES program of Park Rapids. That's Youth Emergency Support Shelter and Supports. And we have the executive director with us. Her name is Kori Nelson, and also the board chair, Ben Erie, here as well. Welcome to Lakeland Currents, you two.
Thank you.
YESS is the acronym that it's known by. What is the YES project all about?
So our mission is to help youth in Hubbard County communities by providing a safe and supportive environment who are in crisis or in need of emergency shelter. So YES came about because we wanted an acronym that would be catchy for the teenagers and something easy to remember, because Youth Emergency Shelter and Supports is a mouthful. So we got the acronym, and really where we're at right now in the development phase of things is bringing awareness to youth homelessness or at risk of homelessness and what that looks like in our communities. So that's really what YES is about right now.
Was there a program like this before YES came into existence?
No.
In Park Rapids?
Nope. So the closest our youth would be going to Evergreen Youth and Family Services here in Bemidji. Otherwise, they would be going farther outside of our counties. So they would be going either to Moorhead, St. Cloud, Duluth, or to the Metro.
And how long has YES been in existence?
So we were established April 5th of 2023. So we're going to be coming up on our 2-year anniversary here shortly, which has gone really fast.
Exciting.
It is exciting.
I'm sure there's lots to do. I mean, what are you providing so far? What kinds of services?
Yep. So we are doing outreach to the community. We started off with doing 100 hygiene kits, and those were spread across to Park Rapids, Nevis, and LaPorte schools. And then we established what we're calling a mobile closet, and that's in LaPorte School. So they have access to clothing, food, and hygiene items. They're at school, they can just go and grab. There's nothing that they have to do. There's nobody they have to talk to go and grab those items. And then now we're at this really cool phase where we have opened a drop-in center. So kind of unique hours because I'm still working full time. So it's after school, 3 to 8 p.m. and then Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Oh.
So they can come in, they can get warm meals. They have access to a clothing pantry, food pantry, hygiene pantry. They can come in and just hang out. And weirdly enough, the youth like to come and sit with us adults and just have conversations. So it's really cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you work full time and yet you still have time to do this?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I've always been a multi-job activity project person. So this is really not anything new for me anyways. I got done with my master's and then YES was already established and I just jumped right into that. Thankfully, I have a cool enough boss that allows me to do those things. So
must be.
Yeah.
Ben, you are the chair of the board?
Yes, correct.
This is a board that controls policy decisions for YES?
Yeah, so as a nonprofit in Minnesota, we have to have a board of directors. I became chair approximately a year ago. The thing that really made me interested in YES in general was how hidden homeless youth is. So when we think of homelessness, I think there's this projection of people living on the streets or kind of the stereotypical what we see in the news, on the newspaper, where, especially in the rural communities, what we're seeing a lot when it comes to homeless youth is the kids that are doubled up, the kids that have really insecure housing, living with an auntie or living with a non-family member. We're seeing a lot of concerns with unstable family dynamics that we have to, that the children are dealing with. And so with that, what we're basically finding is that there are times where we're getting really poor data. So from a metric standpoint, it's really hard to track some of these kiddos. At the same time, we really don't have a lot of local policies or local resources that are going to be a safe place for these children. And so that's really what motivated me to become part of YES and sit on the board and volunteer as well at the drop-in center, because it's a safe place where these kids without shame can get a change of clothes or can get a hot meal or just, can be surrounded by stable adults, for example. So.
Ben, the other thing that people might, as they think about kids living in the scenario that you described, they may think of a whole family moving place to place all together, maybe a couple of kids and a couple of adults. But I kind of doubt that it happens that way very often.
Yeah, I mean, what we normally find is when a family has unstable housing, it really breaks down to the parents, have some options if it's, staying in a place not meant for housing their car, or certain shelters that are really built around single adults. And what happens is those children either get left to a different caregiver, get left to an ad hoc caregiver, so again, an aunt, family friend, or what we're finding is that some of those kids are just having to figure it out on their own. They're having to, there's a higher likelihood of homelessness with adults that struggle with mental health or substance use or chronic illness. And so in a lot of cases, the parents are trying to take care of their own needs, and that kid, in many cases, no fault of the parents, is really having to fend for themselves. And so they're having to double up with friends, or they're having to kind of figure out their on a day-to-day. And so what YES is really built to do right now is to provide that, that stable place after school, and eventually transition into having both short-term and long-term housing options for those youth that we can provide stability. So.
Whenever we talk about homelessness in this country, there's still the concern about the stigma associated with it. And as you two folks, describe to others in your community what you do and how this project, what its goals are, it seems that people often want to ask, well, how did these people become homeless? I don't know if you've heard that yet or not, but everybody's looking for an explanation, and I think usually they expect a certain type of explanation. What's your experience been with that?
Well, I think it's really multifaceted. I think right now, we have an affordable housing crisis. Navigating, housing and housing programs is significantly complicated. My background, I've spent 21 years in social services. I joke with our staff that I can't navigate it with a master's degree. So how are we expecting someone that may be struggling with depression or struggling with substance use or mobility issues to make every appointment, to follow through with everything? And then on top of that, we have these vulnerable children that are basically just along for the ride. And I don't think there is necessarily one answer why an individual or why a family becomes homeless. But what we also see is then we see all these precipitating events. So once you become homeless, there can be a negative effect on your credit. There can be a negative effect on your rental history, which then is kind of a black mark for you for the next, anywhere between a year to 5 years, which really further prevents that family or those individuals to become housed again. And again, these children are just along for the ride. The other thing that I hear quite a bit from the community is that we don't have this problem. And the barrier is, it's very hidden, like I talked about previously, where so many of these children are doubled up with family or are doubled up with friends, and we've had this situation where someone was living in a car, or they're going to school in Park Rapids but living 40 miles away and because that's the only family they have. And so there are all these logistical barriers in rural Minnesota. The other thing we're seeing, and we've talked to some of our local politicians about this, is given where Park Rapids is located, between a couple reservations and being a hub in a rural community, that we're dealing with a lot of the problems of a rural city without any of the resources to this point. So like in Bemidji, we have Evergreen, we have some races in Moorhead, we have a couple of shelters. In Park Rapids, we're seeing a group of individuals, a group of youth that are struggling with housing security. But YES is really the first comprehensive program, other than Mahabiatwa, they do some youth case management, to really address this problem and really look at it beyond just Park Rapids, but how do we effectively serve Hubbard County and our region. So.
And Park Rapids is a fairly good-sized community, really. I mean, it's not surprising that there would be some of this sort of situation in Park Rapids. Is that what you hear too, Kori? I mean, what kind of input have you been getting?
Yeah, so it's probably been about over a year now since I've talked to the county commissioners, and their first question was, where is it? And I said, you're not going to see it. You're going to see the doubling up, you're going to see the vehicles, or you're going to see them staying at friends' houses. So you're not going to see them like you would. Actually, I did 2 focus groups in the Park Rapids ALC, and the first question I asked, I said, what is homelessness? And they all said, living in a tent on the side of the street. And these were 15 to 19-year-olds. And I was like, okay, let's back up. Let's talk about the couch hopping, the doubling up, the parents not being on a lease, having to hop from place to place, living with family members and such. And then I said, well, so, okay, who knows someone, if not yourself, that would be identified as homeless or at risk for homelessness? And all of them raised their hand. And this was between the 2 focus groups, it was 22 kids. So they all know someone, or otherwise they're identifying themselves. So I'm hearing that. I'm hearing a lot of, it is just, we don't see it, it's not here. So we're battling a lot against that.
Right.
Sadly, it's been kind of the main conversation. So
you would have to expect, though, that any town that was going to bring a new project like this into, or people that were going to bring this forward, that a lot of towns, they'd say the same thing, wouldn't they? I mean, I don't think we really have that here.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, I'm kind of the go-to person for YES, and I've been kind of pushing back at a lot of people, just because Hubbard County does have some very poor data as far as what homelessness looks like. Our surrounding counties have great data. Frazee, Detroit Lakes, Wadena, Bemidji, Walker, they have great data as far as their homeless students, whether it's through McKinney-Vento or it's through their community actions. Hubbard County does not have great data. And I think it's a lot of a lack of education, just the lack of knowledge of knowing what youth homelessness looks like.
Mm-hmm. So when we talked earlier, we opened the show and you told us, about yourself a little bit. Is there, you're obviously very dedicated to this task, working full-time and then taking on the executive director of this project. Yeah. What brings you to this type of work? So
I started I did in my, social services realm, I started off doing skills with kids. And this was from first grade all the way up to seniors in high school. So I worked in the schools with kids doing mental health. And I navigated away from the schools, and I went into domestic and sexual violence, where I spent many, many years up until 2022, 23. And so left an organization after some toxic work environment, and I was finishing my master's, and I just figured out I needed to do something with my life, so I started a nonprofit. So it's been kind of my baby, and once I go all in on something, I'm all in. So there's they're not getting rid of me anytime soon.
Tell me more about the drop-in center as it stands. How does that work? And I think you mentioned the hours earlier, Kori,
Yep.
but where is it and how does it work?
Yep. So it's 600 Park Avenue North in Park Rapids. If you're a Park Rapids native, it is the old Red Lantern building. If you're not a Park Rapids native, Polish Head to Toe Salon, Northern Lights Dance Academy is in there. So we're on the very front end of the building. It's a little 500 square feet space right now. And so we got in there, thankfully, at the nick of time, because the landlord had taken down the for rent and they were going to extend the salon. And I reached out and I was like, hey, this is what I can afford. Can we make this work? And they were like, yes, we can make this work. So got into that space. So yeah, we're 3 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Saturday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Saturdays. And really it is just word of mouth right now. Not significant support from the schools as far as being able to get to their students and let them know we're there. So right now it's word of mouth. So we opened on November 18th of the drop-in full time, or for our hours anyways. And from November 18th to December 31st, we served 11 youth. It was 436 services and 191 volunteer hours, saving the organization a little over $2,000. Just being volunteer ran right now. So I am not paid through Yes right now, working on that. And so, yeah, that's kind of what the drop-in looks right now. Got some cool stuff in the works.
So how do you pay this rent that you referred to? I mean, that's not coming out of your pocket, I hope.
Nope, it's not. We are donations and grant funded. So a lot of the donations are paying the rent for us right now. We do have the Minnesota Power Foundation grant that was specifically requested for rent and insurance. So that's covering us for a little while here. Otherwise, yeah, we're running off grants for programming. The Otto Bremer Foundation, United Way of Bemidji Area, Minnesota Power Foundation, the Park Rapids Area Community Fund. I know I'm missing some on that list. But a lot of community donations. It's actually, we're on track right now to, within probably the next month and a half, to outdo our donations what we did last year. So
Terrific.
yeah.
What age kids can come to the drop-in center?
13 to 24 for the drop-in center.
Okay.
So the other thing is I think that there's this misconception when we talk about youth homelessness that once you turn 18, it's a good luck and Godspeed situation, where what we're also seeing are a number of individuals that are transitioning out of foster care, that are transitioning, out of other, institutions, for example, where they don't have a lot of those life skills from 18 to 24. And because of how both the federal Homeless Youth Act is written, is technically a homeless youth is up to 24 years old. And so there are individuals that are kind of technically adults, but are really lacking some of those skills. One of our goals long-term is, with the drop-in center, is to move to some skill-based stuff, are to really help a lot of these youth that are struggling with some of their kind of basic needs, or some of the ADLs that they never learned to this point, to really help them along. The example I've given to our board before is my freshman year in college. I asked why we had an RA, and he laughed at me and said, "You guys would burn the place down." And he was not wrong. None of us had any skills, but yet we are expecting these youth that are coming from chaotic environments, that are, have had insecure housing for years, to basically transition into an apartment independently without any skill building. And so that's one of the goals too, is to, how do we set up these kids to kind of change their trajectory? One of my it's both a very sad stat, but it's a really honest stat, is if you are homeless as a youth, you are 70 times more likely to be homeless as an adult. And so if we can, through our drop-in center, if we can provide that stability, if we can provide those basic needs, and then, we're kind of doing it ad hoc right now with just talking with adults and learning some skill sets, but eventually transition to where we can teach some of those skills that we all have to have in adulthood, that we all pick up, from our parents, or if we go to college, our RA, to really help those youth transition into adulthood in a way that is sustainable, and it is a way that can really pivot their trajectory in life.
The kids that come to the drop-in center now, or your future shelter, when hopefully that happens, do they have to answer questions or fill out a form or document that they're homeless or anything like that?
So when they come in, it's just a basic questionnaire, your basic demographics, their age, their gender, have they experienced domestic or sexual violence? Are they involved with the criminal justice system? To try to grasp an idea, we do ask about suicidal ideations. So just that way, if they're coming in for the first time and they're saying they're having active thoughts of suicide, that we can get them the resources that they deserve, and call in the resources that they deserve in our community that we have available. So.
And if they're under 18, how do you handle the question of, do their parents know where they are?
We haven't run into that quite yet. It is actually a lot of step parents or grandparents bringing the youth in. We do have a set of parents that their kids do come after school every day. And so I don't think it's really an issue yet. For one of the youth, I was like, you know what? Invite your mom to come in and see what this is about. And mom came in and was like, okay, mom was all right with it. So as far as dealing with the parents, if they're there after school, if their parents don't know and their parents come looking for them, we try to do a little bit of that skill building and that communication building with parents as far as to where they're at and why they're here and maybe why they like being here. So,
and are kids then from just a troubled household where they just don't feel comfortable, or they feel they need some place to go to? Are they just as welcome as homeless kids?
Correct. Yep. And something I was actually thinking about, Frazee and Perm and Detroit Lake School bring in a guest speaker. I think they're from Chicago, but it's called the Lionheart Experience. And they talk about these kids that just kind of float in the middle. I was actually talking with my 13-year-old daughter, and she was asking why there's such a hard time in identifying homeless youth. And I said, because sometimes educators and people in our communities have some blinders on, and we look at the star athletes. We look at maybe the National Honor Society kids. You see them in the hallways. And then you see the kids that have behaviors. You see them in the hallways, but you don't see all the other kids that are floating by in the middle. So the drop-in is for everybody. It is not just for those kids that are at risk or those kids that are homeless. If they just want a safe place to hang out, because there's not in Park Rapids, there's no place for youth to go unless they're in a sporting activity or they're going to a basketball game, that kind of thing. So it is for all youth.
And there's somebody there to talk to if they want to chat with an adult?
Correct. Yep. We have a group of volunteers. They're all background checked. And I think actually all of our volunteers are in either nursing or human services field. So it's kind of cool. Like they maybe the youth have never seen these adults, but they really do grow relationships with them. I get the joke quite a bit. If I say I have to leave and somebody else is staying and they're like, why are you leaving? Where are you going? What are you doing? But they're slowly getting used to other people coming in. So there's always an adult there. Yes.
Well, and I was gonna speak to the fact that it's also really nice for them to interact with a lot of these adults in a kind of a non-clinical, non-medical setting, that it's just a laid-back environment where they can share whatever they want to share, and they can be as open and honest as they want to be. And more importantly, what we're really able to do is we're able to just provide that stability where we have an adult there that if someone's having a good day or a tough day, what we're able to do is they can just talk it out, or they can, we can play some cards or play some games, just different things that we can do as volunteers. And then the goal is to really interact more with the community. So right now we have a small group of volunteers that are putting in a decent amount of hours, but long term, we really want to expand this where it's a community-driven organization where we're getting kind of an individual that may be, semi-retired or retired to simply come in and, volunteer every Wednesday, or, if they don't want to interact so much, just cook for the kids or things like that, and really make it part of the community. The other piece, and Kori briefly touched on it, is, another hidden group that we see are these children that are struggling with domestic violence at home, abuse, and there's a level of housing insecurity with that we've had kids that, have their actual household maybe have stable housing, but themselves do not because of sexuality or because of that unstable nature of their household. And those individuals we're also welcoming to make sure that this is that safe place.
Well, we are out of time for this edition of Lakeland Currents. We thank you both for your good work and for coming in for our show today. The location, one more time quickly of, yes?
Yep, 600 Park Avenue North, Park Rapids, Minnesota, the very front facing Highway 71. And stay tuned because we are moving up to 5,000 square feet in 2026.
Again, it's called Youth Emergency Shelter and Supports. That's Lakeland Currents. I'm Todd Haugen.